Hey everybody, so we got some pretty cool news yesterday, 2 days ago. So the Firing Range podcast, which, if you have never checked them out, please do so. Brilliant minds there, brilliant people. They often have people from the Crucible team at Bungie come in and give some insights. And Mercules, who was formerly a co-host on the show, shared some information about the standardization of range with some primary weapons in the show recently. And this standardization is something that we saw recently with the exotic changes, the exotic armor changes, which I didn't care for because to me it kind of ignored the cost investment for all these different items and brought them all to the same value of damage buff. More on that in the other video that I posted on those specifically. But I wasn't a fan of it then. But the standardization here is a little bit different to me because it's about primary weapons and the removal of sort of that range barrier that dictates so many people's decision on what they're going to run, and also completely alienates various archetypes out of relevancy. Like, out of relevancy, they're not relevant, you know what I mean? People completely overlook them because they just can't compete in the range department. So one of those archetypes of weapons is the 180 hand cannons. And so what Merc said basically was that we want, your pulse rifles, your auto rifles, and your hand cannons to sort of all compete within the same ranges. Regardless of, right now it's like aggressive frame pulse rifles have so much more reach than, say, for example, a 140 hand cannon. And they're trying to not get rid of all that entirely, but they do want those ranges to kind of all come closer towards the mid-range than they are right now. Right now, the outliers are so far below optimal mid-range duels, or above optimal mid-range duels, and they want to kind of cluster them all together so that he said around 40 meters, we want all of your hand cannons, your auto rifles, your pulse rifles to be able to compete in those ranges. And so the standardization of those range values is, and there is going to be a little bit of obviously leeway there. Your range stat is going to still matter to a degree. It's just going to be a lesser degree, it sounds like. So one thing that immediately came to mind for me was 180 hand cannons. Like, they have been a joke, they've been a meme, they've been slept on for so long now in the Crucible. Well, not too many of them get used in PvE either for that point. But 180 hand cannons have this really interesting dichotomy about them right now. And I actually am a big fan of 180s. I know that most people dislike them or hate them entirely. But they have this interesting dichotomy right now where they have two things that they are really good at and two things that hold them back. And using 180s well right now is all about leaning into those strengths 110%, like full send on the things that make them good, while finding ways to mitigate or even eliminate their weaknesses. So in the background gameplay, you're going to be seeing a lot of gameplay with my Posterity, which is the Deepstone Crypt Raid 180 hand cannon. It is one of my favorite primaries in the game. It is so fun to use. Mine has Killing Wind and Rampage, and I use backup mag on it, so I have close to 20 bullets in the magazine, so that I can full send on the Killing Wind Rampage relationship. So I always get questions about what is that gun, so I figured get that out of the way early. But let's talk about the two strengths and the two weaknesses of 180 hand cannons. So right now you have these two major strengths of 180s, and first and foremost, it is their deep magazines. So this was a buff that happened, I want to say maybe like a year and a half to 2 years ago, where Bungie looked at 180 hand cannons and said, well, they're lacking. What's one thing we can give them that's not going to just completely break the archetype? And what they decided to do was to buff 180 hand cannon magazine sizes across the board. So all 180s have more ammo in reserves, or in the magazine itself, so you can take on more targets before you have to reload the weapon. Now, I know that sounds like a not so sexy buff. Like, a sexy buff would be something like, oh, we gave all of them plus 20 range. We increased the body shot damage. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of different things you can do to a weapon archetype that's a really sexy, pops off the screen kind of a buff that really changes things dramatically. And this one, I think most people overlooked it because it wasn't so sexy, didn't pop out. They kind of looked at it like, oh, big deal. But what people completely overlooked was the relationship between the mag size and the perk pools for these 180 hand cannons. And that brings me to the second strength of 180s. The second major strength of 180s is that they are completely stacked, just loaded up with kill chaining perks. Look at the posterity, for example. You've got Killing Wind, which is one of the best kill chaining perks in the entire game, regardless of weapon archetype. Killing Wind is an S tier perk. I mean, plus 50 mobility, plus 40 handling, plus 20 range, and then a 5% buff to your damage fall off distance as well on top of all that. So you're gonna see some follow-up kills in the gameplay where, thanks to Killing Wind, I am hitting at literally 120 hand cannon ranges, full damage on a 180. It's nuts. But then you've also got Rampage as well, which is going to give you, that 10% buff, and then 21%, and then 33%, depending on how many kills you've chained. And you're going to see some duels in the gameplay today where I'm doing 80 plus damage. 80 plus damage on a 180 hand cannon. That is nuts. And I don't have to do some crazy intricate build either. That's not using stacking surge mods or not even using the Mantle of Battle Harmony at all. But then you look at something like the Survivor's Epitaph. Like I'm saying, kill chaining perks just stacked in here. You've got in the first column, Tunnel Vision, Heating Up. You've got Killing Wind as well. In the second column, you've got Multi-Kill Clip, Kill Clip, Adrenaline Junkie. These things absolutely excel at kill chaining. And you might be saying, hey, look, Ryan, a ton of other things have kill chaining perks. There's a ton of weapons in the game that have Killing Wind or have Kill Clip. And while that may be true, the benefits to these damage perks are exponentially greater on 180 hand cannons than they are on most other weapons. Most other weapons, you get a kill, you reload the gun to get kill clip, and then maybe now you can do a 2 burst or something like that. But the cadence is much, much different with 180s because of the way that the deep magazines interact with those kill chaining perks, where with 17 to 19 rounds in a magazine, I can actually go in there with Killing Wind and Rampage, and I can drop 4 people in a row without ever reloading the weapon. It's seamless. My TTK is going to get dropped dramatically. They're now going to kill faster than 140 hand cannons. They're going to kill faster than 140 hand cannons with Kill Clip on them. And that's what I'm saying. A 180 hand cannon with just Rampage active is going to kill faster than a 140 can kill with Kill Clip, a greater damage perk active. And that's what I'm saying. This is what people completely overlook about these 180 hand cannons, is that the mileage they get from damage perks is so much greater than most other archetypes of weapons out there in the game. So when you learn to lean into the deep mags and to lean into the kill chaining perks, you can do some nasty things. And there's triples, there's quads, there's even one Slayer medal in this gameplay, where I'm getting so many multi-kills, never reloading the gun. I can stay in the fight, stay engaged, and keep fragging out and deleting people at optimal TTKs they can't dream of. But now let's talk about the 2 weaknesses, the 2 things that really hold 180 hand cannons back. Those 2 things are their range and their optimal TTK. Let's start with the range. So obviously 180 hand cannons have horrible range right now, just terrible range. You have to get pretty close and personal in order to use these things effectively and to get full damage on them. But here's where this news that Merc is telling us about comes into play. 180 hand cannons are going to be the recipients of these range buffs to kind of help everything compete in that 40-meter range. Now, to put that into perspective, right now, the posterity, if you have hammer forged, you've got accurized rounds, you've got a ranged masterwork on, it will experience damage drop-off at about 31 meters. Now, we don't know how much of a benefit 180s are going to get, if they're going to make it all the way up to that 40 range, or if they're going to be maybe 38 meters. Maybe that's the trade-off of running the 180s. We don't know, but it sounds like they're going to get several more meters of range, and that's going to be a huge boon to these things, because the range holding them back is one of the main reasons people don't use them. So to take that off the board and to neutralize that weakness means that they're only going to get significantly stronger now. Now, that other weakness I told you about, the optimal TTK, it is a slow TTK at 1 full second. 140s drop you in, I think it's 0.87. So it's a full 0.13 seconds slower than a 140, which isn't a lot on paper, but you can feel the effects of that in a real-time duel. But we have to remember that one strength that I mentioned. It's the mileage that these 180 hand cannons get out of damage perks and kill chaining perks. They get so much better with these perks than a 140 could ever dream of. So while a 140 may have the edge in a just standard 1v1 duel where we both just stand and deliver, the 180 has a much higher ceiling, and that's the trade-off. And it still really surprises me that it's something I hear otherwise really sophisticated and intelligent PvP players say, that 180 hand cannons are terrible. And the reason being, you have to have a damage perk. And this is where I differ from them. Because the ceiling is so high on a 180 hand cannon, it is something I'm willing to do. I'm willing to take that 0.13 second TTK dock in my initial duel. And now for my first duel, I just go into it understanding I have to outplay the opponent, right? They're going to have the advantage. I've got to outplay them. So maybe that means I throw my melee ability in first. Maybe that means I prime with a grenade. But either way, I need to be creative about the way that I approach my engagements. Maybe it means I pick my first engagement much more carefully and make sure that I get the first shot. That way, I don't have to worry about my longer TTK. If I get the first shot in, I can, as long as I'm hitting my shots, delete them before they can turn on me and put me down. At which time, I now have a primary weapon that is capable of outdueling just about anything else out there in the primary department. Maybe I'm using Rampage, maybe I'm using Multi-Kill Clip, maybe I'm using Golden Tricorn on the Ikelos 180, but whatever it is, I now have a much higher ceiling. And that's what makes these 180s incredible. So this range buff, this blanket range buff that they're all getting is going to be a huge boon to the archetype. I think it means you're going to start seeing more of them being used. Because one thing I know about Destiny players is that once they get that dopamine hit, they're hooked. They're ready to continue whatever it is they just did that got them that dopamine hit. They want to do more of that. And with 180s, you can do so much kill chaining and go on these massive kill streaks and get multi-kills that gives you that dopamine hit. Just winning a 1v1 here and there, sure, that's fun. But when you can start snowballing stuff, hey, that gives a completely different feeling. It leans into that power fantasy. You feel like a snowball that's rolling down a hill, gaining momentum, gaining strength, gaining mass. And it's that powerful feeling that keeps players coming back, keeps them engaged. So if you haven't crafted a 180 hand cannon, or maybe you haven't farmed for a really good roll, it might be something you want to think about doing now. Get yourself a great posterity with Killing Wind and Rampage. Check your vault for a good Frontier's Cry. Craft an Ikelos 180. Maybe focus some Survivor's Epitaphs at Shaxx. You've got a lot of options on the table for 180s, and they all have these strengths I just listed. The kill chaining potential, the deep magazines. So as always, good luck in all of your farming endeavors, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning into the video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to leave a like in the video and subscribe for additional Destiny content. If you are at all interested, I also have a second channel. Well, actually I have like 3 channels. I technically have 4 channels. But I have a second channel that I upload to very regularly, and it is my whiskey channel. It's just a side channel I do. I like to collect whiskeys, review whiskeys. I like the science behind distillation and how whiskey's made and all that stuff. So I have a channel devoted to that, unpacking the history, the science, and reviewing the whiskeys themselves. So if that's something that might interest you, feel free to check that out. It's called Vanguard, which is obviously a play on True Vanguard, and a pour of whiskey is called a dram. Married the two. I don't know if it was clever or not, but in the moment I thought it was, and we just rolled with it. Be warm and well fed, my friends, and I hope to catch you in the Crucible. Bye-bye.